Hey, so my name is Brandon Bruce, and God's given me the privilege of being the founding senior pastor, along with my wife Jennifer, of Church Experience.
I love that God knew you would be a part of this story and you would be here today celebrating CE's anniversary with us, their 10-year anniversary. It's crazy. But I love that you were a big part of that story too, and that we all get to not only be a part of this movement, but we get to see lives changed for Jesus Christ, and our personal lives are being changed and blessed and grown in Jesus each day too.
Let me tell you about how the story began. So when I was 18 years old, God called me into ministry. I remember walking through the lobby of our church, which is a really big church in Michigan, and they had a board posted one year in the lobby that talked about all the impact that church had had over the years, the 100 people that have gone out into full-time ministry from that church, the millions of dollars over time that have been given to missions, and all of these incredible things. It just lit my heart on fire to say, wow, look at the impact that a local church could have. I remember a prayer that I prayed to God, saying, God, I just want to give everything to you, and I want you to use me as big as possible to make an impact in your name. Went into school to study being a pastor. God connected me with my wife, Jennifer. She also grew up as a pastor's kid, and God just so perfectly put us together. For the last 5.5 years before we moved to plant Church Experience, I was pastoring a 100-year-old church. It was in Lansing, Michigan, great church, and I really enjoyed being there. We had 2 of our 4 kids at that church. When God started to stir our heart to leave, it was a very uncomfortable step to consider because we were in a good spot. I share that story because we were really comfortable. We had lived in the home that we were in for about 5 years. We had just enrolled our oldest son, Jalen, into a Christian kindergarten. And over a 2-year process, God started to stir in my heart the vision to plant a church. And it kind of came out of nowhere.
Have you ever been comfortable in your life and God just comes in and jolts that and mixes it up and says, comfort isn't where you will see the biggest difference for me. I have even bigger plans, but you got to jump out of that comfort zone. That's exactly what happened to us in Michigan. Life seemed so good, but God said, no, you've got to get out of that comfort zone and come start a church. And it has been an amazing journey since.
I remember some of the challenges with thinking about leaving, and there's a lot of fears in that, and there's a lot of insecurity in that. And God, what do you want me to do? And is this wise? This is the right thing? And I spent some time in prayer and discernment and talking with Jennifer, and a mentor of mine. And one of the mentors in my life spoke some real wisdom into my life in that time. He said, when the devil put in front of Jesus, to bow his knee to him, and he showed him the whole world, and he said, all this could be yours. It wasn't that the devil was offering Jesus something different than what God was lining Jesus up for. King of Kings, Lord of Lords, all that would be his. So why would that be so tempting? And he told me, he said, what the devil was doing is he was offering Jesus a shortcut that avoided the cross, avoided the pain, avoided the hardship to get to the ultimate calling. Seems like that you have a call to plant a church from scratch, and that's a harder road to get to that calling, big kingdom impact. But if that's where God's calling you, don't take the shortcut. You'll never regret it. But in that process of prayerfully discerning things, there's something that was tucked into my Bible. It was a program from a funeral from my wife's grandfather. We called him Papa. He lived into his late 90s on a farm in North Carolina, godly man. On the back of that program, there was one of his life verses. And it was from Isaiah, and it talked about how the Lord will uphold you, and He'll help you. And I remember just that verse just being so helpful for me as I thought about letting go, and it tells us not to fear and to trust God, and God just saying, hey, I'm speaking this directly to you. Don't fear, trust me. I'm going to help you. I'm going to uphold you with my righteous right hand. And that verse really stuck with me through that journey of letting go, and I could surrender my fears to God of all the what ifs. The transition was a special time of dreaming and visioning, ending well, but also prayer and fasting. And one of the cool things that happened in that transition time, in the lobby, before or after the service, I'm talking to this young couple, and their names are Josh and Ashley. And I said, hey, Josh, what do you want to do with your future? And he said, well, I want to open a restaurant. And I said, well, that's really cool. And I'm just getting to know him. And I said, well, where do you want to open your restaurant at? And he said, I want to open it in Clearwater, Florida. Well, Clearwater, Florida is where I just told our church weeks before that, hey, God's called us to go plant a church on the west side of Tampa in Clearwater, Florida. And so I couldn't believe it. Out of every city in America, right? I mean, the exact place that I just said, and he had no idea. My jaw dropped. He probably was like, why are you shocked at that? But I just knew God was working. And the cool thing is, if you fast forward, they reaffirmed their commitment to Christ. They became, right there in Michigan, our first members of our launch team ended up moving with us to Florida. They were the first couple that we baptized out at Pier 60 at Clearwater Beach, and we baptized so many countless people there ever since then. God started providing. So we moved to Florida 7 months after we had originally planned, because we spent time of training and preparation at 12 Stone Church. We moved into a little apartment with our 4 little kids, newborn, 2, 4, and 6-year-old, and we're excited and we're ready, and we can't wait to see what God builds through us. And we came to Tampa because we saw a large city, about 3 million people, where about 70% or more of them were not walking with Jesus, far from God. We saw a huge mission field. We wanted to spend our lives somewhere we could make a big impact, and we could start a multiplying church, a church that would not only impact the people in the location that we were leading, but that would multiply out and touch different parts of that city and maybe even beyond. And so that was our vision, and we started in our apartment living room. Our first day there, as we arrived in 2014, 9 adults and 6 kids. And it was really special. We would meet and we'd periodically go visit other churches in the area. We'd have pool parties together. We would go do outreach together, get to know people. And our first big event was a barbecue outreach event. So we rented a pavilion at a park, and we invited everybody we knew. We were just aggressively going out, evangelizing, inviting people, because we knew that Jesus was their greatest hope, that Jesus could change their life. And so we're out in the communities trying to build the church, and our first event arrives, a barbecue. And I remember standing around in a circle praying with our small little group that we had assembled to serve and to lead this event. And we had the food on the table, and we didn't know if anybody would show up. But you know what? People started showing up, and life after life after life, dozens of people showed up. It was amazing. I think we had 60, 70 people that showed up for that first barbecue. We went from the barbecue event to having a second event, which is we rented a bowling alley, and we paid for people's bowling, and we asked people to come join us. And it was great. We got everybody together, and we shared the vision for a few minutes, and we had some fun together. And then a third event, we rented the ice skating rink at the Countryside Mall, and we extended invites all over town. I mean, it was just a wild time, but God was working. And that last event was our biggest event. We had about 100 people that showed up, and we were inviting them to be a part of the church. And eventually we got to this stage where we had enough of a group with us between our launch team gatherings and our outreach events that we planned our first launch team gathering at Countryside High School. And so we started meeting there in April of 2014. And we had our first launch team gathering, had a few dozen people. We hired some babysitters to watch the kids in a side band room, and we met out in the lobby. And in these launch team gatherings, it's amazing to me that the church was growing time over time, because when we were sitting in these hard plastic chairs, we didn't have a worship team, so we were playing on a big video projection screen worship from other churches. And so I'd stand up every week and I'd say, hey, one day we're going to have a worship team. I mean, we were playing YouTube videos from other churches. And then I would get up and I would share a little devotional message, and we'd have some snacks, and man, people were giving their lives to Jesus. And right there in that public high school lobby, the church was being birthed. The church was growing. We realized it's time to move into the auditorium. So we took a big leap of faith, and we hired a worship leader. We moved into the auditorium. We set a date for a preview service. We got a kid experience director, and we had a big preview service. And we did some advertising. We all told everybody we knew, and it was amazing to us that we had almost 200 people show up at that preview service in the fall of 2014. In January 2015, it was amazing to see what God did as the church launched. And I want to tell you about that. We had sent a mailer out to the community. We'd done some advertising. We all invited everybody we knew. We handed out invitations. We called through everybody that we could call through. I mean, we worked tirelessly building up to that launch day in January 2015. And on that day, I'll never forget it as long as I live. It was amazing. Standing in the entrance to the auditorium, we had pipe and draped off. This auditorium is a big room, had hundreds of seats, and we had pipe and drape down the aisles to block off the side sections. And there was these little side sections where we were going to have our service, and we had a stage up front. And I was standing in the back as people started to come in. And I couldn't believe it, as dozens and dozens and dozens of people were coming in at the same time. And it's difficult to even get in the door. There's so many people showing up, and I couldn't believe it. And I turned around and looked over my shoulder, and our ushers are tearing down the pipe and drape because we had already filled the middle section and ended up filling the entire room, hundreds of spaces. And I couldn't believe what God was doing. It felt like revival. So over 50 people gave their lives to Jesus on that opening Sunday. When I got there and announced that we had 592 people on our grand opening launch day for Church Experience, everybody cheered and it was incredible. But the real celebrating for me weeks later was when I realized that the church that I had left in Michigan, the average annual attendance, the record of 591 in Lansing, Michigan is our highest average annual attendance, launching with 592. To me, it was a lesson God taught that I'll never forget is whatever you give up for him, God, he can do better. He can give back more. And when he went up to what we had given up, it just reminded me, it's been one of those anchors. I know that God was in this and he was building a foundation of something special.
I remember the difference between before launch day and then once we launched was like as a kid, we were in this music room in a high school with a few leaders watching us kids, and we're going crazy. We were having fun. And then after we launched, man, I mean, you see kids coming left and right. It felt like a dream come true. It was a cool thing to see.
When all those people are showing up, I was thinking how excited I was that the church was growing and everyone was going to experience a great time. And I was just so happy. It wasn't just a dream, it became a reality.
What's been special to me about watching the church grow is watching the people come and it get bigger over the years and just making fun relationships with my friends. It's impacting watching people to come to know Jesus.
At launch day, I was just a baby being passed around and getting loved. A fun fact is that my parents always look at me and it reminds them of how old the church is because we're about the same age.
Eventually we realized we've got to find a space. And so in that process, we lost some people and it was difficult, it was challenging. Ask those questions, like, are we gonna make it? Are we ever gonna get into a building? But we stayed faithful and we kept pressing into the vision, we kept praying, and God really did a miracle. One day, one of our launch team members, still good friends of mine to this day, Johnny and Judy Mercado, they came to me and said, Brandon, we ran into somebody we used to know here in the city, and they attend another church in town over in Dunedin, about 10 minutes from here. And they said that their church is looking to rent out a 2-story building on their property. And we think that could be a great space for us to go rent. And so I went over that day to do a building walkthrough with that pastor, Pastor Kurt Swan, First Christian Church in Dunedin. It became a full-on construction project. There was construction dust everywhere. It was a massive project, a lot of people. We were working hard renovating this building that we didn't even own. And we took a risk. We were putting a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of love into that building. And God was so gracious to give us this space. And in March of 2019, we opened up this new to us space for Church Experience that we were leasing. And man, the church started growing and lives were being changed. Some really good things were happening. And over the course of that year, Pastor Kurt Swan and I would still meet up regularly for lunches and building our friendship. And we tried to serve them and love on them. And in that year, God was really pulling us closer together. And I remember one lunch meeting toward the end of that year, I was with Pastor Kurt and his brother Steve, and we were at a local restaurant, and we were just talking about how things were going. And the conversation came up, it's kind of wild that we're both on the same property, serving the same God, doing the same thing. Wouldn't it make sense for us to come together? And the phrase that came up that really became a statement for our church is we said, we'd be better together. And at the end of the day, First Christian Church merged into Church Experience, giving us this beautiful multi-million-dollar property 5 minutes from the coast. And for them, it breathed new life in the church. So this church had kind of been moving along and in a similar place for quite a few years. Saw hundreds of people now coming on their property, saw young people coming, saw people giving their lives to Jesus and being baptized, and some incredible things that they wanted to be a part of. And for us, it added stability and strength and wisdom and so many wonderful things. And so together, we came together and realized we truly are better together. Around that year, some wild things happened. We merged together in that early part of 2020. Well, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic hit across the world and shut churches down. Pastor Kurt's wife, unfortunately, passed away not long after that time. Pastor Kurt got cancer and then Thank God he recovered. He's still on the team to this day and helping us serve. And God divinely knew that we needed each other, that we were better together.
One memory I have is Brandon and I talking about names for the church. And one day I said, Brandon, what about church experience? We had prayed over this and been asking, God, what do you want us to name this church that hasn't even begun yet? And that name came to us because we wanted to see more people experience a full life in Jesus Christ. What was crazy is we had no idea it would turn into one church with many experiences. That wasn't even a dream in our minds at the time, but God knew that that was the plan and that that's what he wanted to happen in the life of church experience.
At year 5, when he gave us this vision, one church, many experiences, it made so much sense. We as two different churches, we're going to come together and everything that makes sense, let's be one church. And then areas where we can have variety and differences, there'll be the many experiences. But when God gave us this vision of one church, many experiences, he gave us something that became a unique model for planting churches. The idea was that we can be incredibly efficient if we're one church. And so everything that makes sense to come together on the back end, the operational side of the church and the resources and the shared leadership and all these sorts of things, will be one organization together. But we want to empower the local leaders, many experiences, to be the primary preachers. And they preach most of the time, 70 to 85% of the time, they're the preacher. We'll empower them to create. For example, we all do outreach event, but if you start a homeless ministry or a kids sports camp, whatever God calls you to do in your city to reach people, do that. And so God gave us a vision to be one church, many experiences, efficient, but yet flexible, powerful together, better together, building God's kingdom. And that was the vision God gave us. And originally, we were figuring out these two churches becoming one here at our central location in Dunedin, Florida. But God quickly turned that into a church planting vision. And we started putting the feelers out there for church planters, and God started bringing people to us, and we started planting new church locations through church experience. And that quickly grew from a couple a year to now we're on pace to planting many new church locations a year. And these years later, we just marvel at what God has done, not only in the United States, but even beyond, and how he is planting churches. Souls are being saved, lives are being changed. The next generation is being raised up in Christ. Leaders empowered, churches being planted, people experiencing relief in disaster, people in addiction being set free. Truly, God is changing lives and building his kingdom. And our daily prayer is that God will accelerate his vision through us, that lives will be transformed, his kingdom will be built up, his church will grow, so that more people can experience a full life in Jesus Christ.
When God moves, you have a choice. You can start running with him, or you're going to miss out and look back and say, oh, I wish I would have been a part of that. You all are people who want to see lives changed. You're people that we love so dearly, and we love making a difference with you and doing this journey with our CE family.
One of the unique aspects of our vision is to be a church that's biblically solid while being modern in style. This is so important to us because as you look out over the landscape of the church world, you see that there's a lot of churches in an attempt to grow and reach more people and make a difference, which are all good things, right? Because Jesus told us in the book of John that it's to his Father's glory to bear much fruit. Like, we want to make a difference. We want to see lives change. It's a good thing. But in an attempt to grow, I've heard it said this, that liberalism theologically, not politically, liberalism theologically enters the church through the door of evangelism. In other words, as we attempt to grow and reach more people, theologically, people can start to water down, change, adapt the message in order to make it easier for people to digest, and in so doing, lose the very power of the gospel. When they stop preaching about sin, it takes away the beauty and the wonder of salvation. And we have a desire to be a church that's always biblically solid, and as much as we want to reach people, we can't change the unchanging message of God's word. And we need to be theologically sound and conservative theologically and stand on solid ground. While at the same time, you see a lot of churches with that heart to not change the message, they never change their methods because they don't want to change, right? God is unchanging, and so we don't change. And and that heart, which can be founded in a good place, is misapplied, and they never change their style, they never change their approach, they never change their methods of ministry. And what happens is over time they become irrelevant, they stop reaching the next generation, they stop seeing people baptized, they're not evangelistically effective. It's a great community, and they would say they're very loving, but it appears through the eyes of someone who walks through the door that's never been there a lot of times that they're loving to each other, and they've become very insulated and focused on keeping each other happy, cared for, and loved, which are all very important things, but unfortunately sometimes to the exclusion of reaching the lost world around us. And so we want to stay modern in style so that we can speak the language of culture and deliver to them this unchanging message that's biblically sound. And so our heart is to have these church locations that grow to whatever extent that God has them, wherever those ripples may go. We want to establish a church that's biblically solid, modern in style, and faithfully preaches the gospel.
I think my favorite thing about CE is the life change. God's moving, and it's an honor to be a part of it.
What I love about CE is it's not the building, it's not the place, it's the people.
My favorite thing about CE is coming to learn and grow with all my friends, worshiping and learning about God.
One of the things I always enjoy is serving at CE. I love helping set up and being around all the fun people and then going upstairs in KE and doing the KE worship.
We love God, and we love seeing lives changed for Jesus Christ. It just makes the journey more fulfilling, more special.
So our hope is that with all that God has done, all of it from Him, all of it for Him, that you will see that there is something great that God is building, and we want you to be a part of it. However God leads you, because we believe that we're better together, and as we partner together, we can build God's kingdom. God can do more than we ask or imagine. Will you join us? Will you take your next step so that we together can experience that full life that only Jesus offers, a life full of forgiveness and love and hope and purpose and meaning? God has so much more planned for you and for us as we build His kingdom, lift up the name of Jesus, and give our very best to seeing God's kingdom come and His will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Right on.
Happy birthday, CE family.
Happy birthday, CE. Happy birthday, CE.
Happy birthday, CE! Happy birthday, CE!
Happy birthday, church experience.
Happy
birthday,
birthday,
CE.
CE.